I'm really happy to turn over this conference for your first bit of content to Dr. Rob Klee. He's here to moderate the first panel. He is a Yale alum, the former commissioner of the Connecticut Department of Energy and Environmental Protection, a Yale faculty member for teaching courses, and the key sounding board and guide for the content of this conference. You can tell around here we all wear lots of hats and have lots of titles, and it's because of the passion of the work that we do and the generosity of making sure that things happen well and effectively and successfully. And Rob embodies that of giving spirit. So with that, I will turn it over to Rob.
So I'll invite my panelists to come up and join me as well.
Hi. Hi. Either way.
So good afternoon, everyone. That's what, yeah, we could do call and response. It's okay. And we're going to get you involved in this panel. As Julie embarrassed me in the introduction, I am Rob Klee. I'm here to moderate our opening panel. It is my honor and privilege to do so. This has been a really big year in clean energy. So much has changed in the relatively short time since we've been together at this Yale Clean Energy Conference that we wanted to start the conference with a panel on the state of play in clean energy. The Bipartisan Infrastructure Law, the Inflation Reduction Act, they've been accelerating clean energy deployment in a wonderfully frenetic and hectic and sometimes disorienting pace and scale. And this opening panel is hopefully going to orient us for the next day and a half together. And we've planned what is hopefully going to be a lively discussion with industry leaders who are at this cutting edge of the clean energy marketplace, and they're moving it, and in some cases making it and creating that market. And opening a panel, we want to make sure we're hearing from you in this panel, outside this panel, in all of our networking opportunities. So start thinking about your questions early. So we have an amazing high-powered panel, and yes, I do like puns, to kick off this conference this afternoon. And I even laugh at my own. For all my financing deploying clean energy folks, you know, you're smiling at least. We have this terrific panel, and I'm thrilled to be joined. Let's start in the middle with Andrew Bowman from Jupiter Power, the CEO and founder. It's an energy storage company backed by BlackRock's diversified infrastructure business since 2022. They're in the business of developing and constructing, owning and operating large-scale storage projects in U.S. markets with about 1,000 megawatts hours operating and 11 gigawatts? Yeah? Okay.
That's correct.
So we want to hear a lot more about that. And he's a serial entrepreneur. I won't go into all the businesses he's started because I want to focus that he's written a book, which is awesome, on the West Texas power plant that saved the world. So come up to him afterwards and ask him about that. Plus, I'll skip where you did your graduate degrees and just mention your undergraduate was here at Yale. Next, we have Jessica Joffrey at NextEra Renewable Investments, and she oversees the financial strategy and investment structuring of NextEra Energy Investments, the early stage equity investment arm of NextEra Energy, the larger company. In this role, Jessica and her team are focused on developing, structuring, executing transactions designed to create that value across venture capital, social impact, and strategic strategies. So she's that executive director who's in that innovation space and funding and financing that innovation space. She's had other roles there, and I won't give you PTSD about your investor relations role, but she came to NextEra Energy with experience on Wall Street and was a founding part of that New York Green Bank. So our Green Bank fans in the audience has someone to connect with. And I'll skip over where you went to undergrad and focus on the fact that you did your master's degrees here, one in energy and the environment, and other in business administration right here at SOM at Yale and at the School of the Environment. So Jessica, welcome.
Thank you.
Last but definitely not least, Jose Antonio Miranda, Avangrid Renewables, the president and CEO, appointed to that position in September 2022, and he's leading the growth and development of the company's renewable business in the US with extensive background prior to Avangrid, the CEO of onshore in the Americas for Siemens, chairman of its boards in US, Mexico, and Brazil, and he's been the secretary of the board and executive committee of the American Wind Energy Association. Now, I will say that your master's degree from the Universidad Pontificia de Comillas in Madrid, Spain, is the Yale of Spain. Just to make sure we're all feeling like we're on the same panel. So let's give our panelists a quick welcome. Thank you. So as you've noticed, we've assembled this initial panel with critical segments of our clean energy landscape. And so I'm going to start with short questions for each of you on the state of play in finance, development, deployment, innovation in your parts of the world. And Jose Antonio, let me start with offshore wind, which is the new kid on the block in the US, at least definitely not in Europe or elsewhere. It has a lot of excitement, but if anyone reads the news, it's in some interesting moments. And maybe that's being polite about the current state of wind energy in the Northeast. So maybe you give us some insights on what is the current state of play of offshore wind in the US, and what is Avangrid Renewables doing about it?
Thank you. And first of all, thank you to Yale for having us today. Offshore wind is a trendy topic now, right?
Yeah.
May I start maybe with what our company is doing on the arena, and then to try to understand what is happening in the industry. First, Avangrid is a pioneer. Avangrid belongs very proud to the Iberdrola group. Iberdrola was in Europe starting with offshore many years ago, and now is operating more than 1,500 megawatts in offshore in Europe. And we're pioneering here in the US also, because as we speak, we are building the first large scale 800 megawatt offshore wind farm off the coast of Massachusetts, together with our partner, CIP. Every time that we put another turbine up, I got a picture. There are 62 turbines, and now we already have up 4 of them. Probably a lot of press, media coverage in the last days about you. You have seen massive write-offs of some companies because they realized that the PPAs that they signed some 2 years ago, 3 years ago, they are not going to be financeable, and they entered into commitments in this with the supply chain that now they need to scrap. No? I can talk about our experience, our company. As I said, we are already building one wind farm, which is isolated of all this because we closed the supply chain 2 years ago, before all this disruption with the crazy prices that were coming from the vessel installators, and also with the continuous interest rate increase. Both things are impacting very much the cost of energy. I have to say that for North England, though, offshore wind is perfect. The wind is rich in the coastal area, is close to the coast, the sea bottom is accessible. So still living in this crazy situation with the prices of, as I said, of the main components, and the prices of the vessels are double that they were before. Still, very recently, only few days ago, there were prices announced in New York in the range of $145 per megawatt hour, which is not crazy for Northeast England. No? But clearly, these prices, they will come up to a much normal level when this disruption in the supply chain finally comes to an end. No? In our case, we had 2 PPAs, one in Connecticut and one in Massachusetts, and we were very transparent, very upfront 1 year ago when we were presenting our business plan in New York Exchange. We said very clearly to all the investors, to everyone that wanted to hear, administration, everyone, the PPAs, they are not going to be financeable, and we are not going to proceed with them because that would entail billions of losses. I have to say the administration in Connecticut and in Massachusetts, they were, I have to praise the reaction, because even at the beginning was a shock, but when we were transparent, showing all the numbers, they fully understood. And they said, well, clearly this is not the way, but then we have to find a way because the leases are good. As I explained, The wind is very rich and it's a good solution. So we decided to terminate these PPAs. As our company was very prudent, we didn't have any important commitment with the supply chain, so we didn't have to make any write-off, anything, just to pay the collateral that, I mean, talking about billions of investment, it was a very small collateral. We're talking about 40 million in one case, 42 million in one case, and 60 million in the other. I think that we came to a very good solution. And now in January, it's going to be a new possibility to bid. And I think that is going to be also hopefully a success to see how companies are going to be able to put offshore again in the agenda of Massachusetts and Connecticut, and Rhode Island as well.
So, Jose Antonio, we're going to come back to some of those sort of challenges in the offshore wind, and I want to put a placeholder on particularly the grid requirements, the build out there. But I want to make sure we get to our other panelists with their sort of opening 5 minutes on what it is that you see in the state of play. And Jessica, I'd like to pivot to you and maybe tee up a question on the old school clean energy sector of, grid scale solar, but you're in this sort of interesting space, part of NextEra, but also exploding or investing in new sort of catalysts for the future of clean energy. So where do you see that intersecting with grid scale solar?
It's interesting. It's for those of you who don't know much about NextEra Energy, I know our previous CEO used to say we were the biggest company no one's ever heard of. We're a $150 billion company. We have $170 billion of assets. We have the largest regulated utility at Florida Power and Light in North America, and we have the world's largest renewable energy developer, largest generator of wind and solar at NextEra Energy Resources, which is our unregulated business. It's 48 other states in the country. We do need a renewables project in Alaska, so if anyone has any leads on that, and then we could be in all states, we would appreciate that. Look, wind for a long time had a lot of runway versus traditional generation. Solar is not new, right, to having, I don't know that I would call it old school, but I certainly would say both categories don't need much help getting off the ground. It's really me sitting in this program, 12 years ago, I would have been shocked to say that it's the lowest cost form of generation. To build a new solar project in this country is 41% cheaper than building new gas generation. Even with $3 gas prices, which I'm not sure any of us think it's going to stay there for long. And so a lot of what we do as a company, we have a footprint that we have a real zero goal by 2045 at our regulated utility to replace all of our gas generation with solar and hydrogen and storage. But we also have a huge handprint on our regulated business, and we're building in the next 4 years 41 gigawatts of wind and solar to help C&I customers, to help other utilities use solar to reduce costs for their customers. And so to answer your question about the intersection, a lot of people don't know this about us because we're sort of operating such large-scale projects, but we've always found it to be very important to stay at the cutting edge of new technology development. We did our first battery storage project, and we lost a ton of money on it in the 80s. Right? We've been developing renewable energy for over 20 years. And so at the time, we were taking a risk. We were taking a risk that we knew we needed to take to be at the front end of developing this market. And as NextEra is able to invest $20 billion a year in new infrastructure, it also allows other companies to get more done and the country to decarbonize. And so within NextEra Energy Investments, where I lead our financial strategy and structuring, we don't assume that PV is going to be the solar technology of the future, right? We say, okay, let us make $1.5 million investment in companies that are testing out new solar technologies. See if it works. Let us, invest in advanced solar tracking, right? Does that help? Does that help the industry move forward? Does that help our supply chain? And so I think the market is changing, and a lot of technologies, even with the industry as developed as it has become, A lot of technologies seem like they're here to stay and they're never going away, but we don't take that for granted. And so that's what we do to try and kind of stay on all sides and make sure the industry develops and we evolve with it.
So terrific, and that's probably a good segue over to Andy Bowman to talk about this important sort of element, sticking on this idea of this, what is the future in all of these clean energy technologies, managing our intermittent clean energy, integrating it into the energy system, ensuring the grid is resilient to extreme weather and extreme load events. That's kind of why Jupiter Power exists. So maybe tell us a bit more of what led you there and what work you're doing right now.
Yeah, thanks. So Jupiter Power is a company. We have about 90 employees. We were founded in 2017. We succeeded in 2019 in raising our first major backing. And at this point, as was mentioned, we have about 1,000 megawatt hours operating in the market every day. We've got a number of projects in construction that will be done later this year, next year. And we have about 11 gigawatts of projects in development. These are new projects that we hope to build in the future, all the way from California through the middle of the country, and a lot of work up here in the Northeast, in New York, and PJM and the eastern part of the country. Energy storage is really one of the newest players in electricity markets, and it's come upon us very quickly. It's recently become a technology that you could really deploy at scale. The scale of the projects that we have built are in the hundreds of megawatts. These are 10, 15, 20 acres of batteries. They operate like a power plant in discharging power, and we discharge into the grid and we charge from the grid. I think what's the most useful way to understand why storage is emerging in the way that it has, which is extremely quickly. If you look at the interconnection queues, which are the power plants that are in development that are trying to get rights to deliver power into the grid, if you look at them from California to MISO and SPP in the middle of the country, ERCOT here in the Northeast, there are just gigawatts and gigawatts and gigawatts of storage projects trying to work their way through that process so that they can be constructed. And understanding why that's happening goes to the fundamental dynamic that renewables in the grid have been going through over the last 20 years or so. If you think back to the way grids started, when you had a big population center, and then there was this new electricity generating technology, a power plant. You built the power plant next to the city. The power plant served the needs of the city, and that was great. And then as we got better at this, you built more power plants. As different cities built more and more of them, you connected them with power lines so they could share power between each other. And then the grid all the way across the country kind of evolved from that. Population center generation near the population center. And it was very logical, easy to understand, basic dynamic. What's been happening with the energy transition over the last 20 or 30 years or so, starting with some of the first projects in the 1990s, is you've basically been inverting that dynamic. You've been building wind and solar projects, which have been the cheapest, most insurgent market player in just the economics of wholesale power. You've been building more and more of these. They capitalize on much less dense power sources, so you've been building more and more of them in rural locations distant from load. And at the same time, a lot of the coal and gas plants that we have built in the past near population centers have stopped generating. They've become uncompetitive and have been closed down for one reason or another. And so the entire grid system that we built with the transmission lines connecting generation to load has basically been inverted. And now we're using these small branch lines that we had built out to rural areas, whether that's in California or in Texas or in the middle of the country or in a place like Maine, upstate. We've been using those lines to inject power and deliver it back to the cities. And that creates some really challenging dynamics. One of them is the transmission constraints. There's only so much room for ferrying power back to the cities, and so you get transmission congestion that really challenges getting that power delivered to the customers. And you also are creating a a lack of generation that's needed in big load pockets during periods of high consumption because you can't get all the power that you need at all the times that you need it because we're using more wind and solar that's only available when the wind is blowing and the sun is shining. And so that's put a real premium on getting power when people need it, where they need it, and doing that in a system with a lot of transmission constraints. I would say that in the past, generating power was maybe the most valuable thing that you could do in the power business. Now it's delivering it when and where people want it from a very complex and diverse set of generators with a lot of interplay between complex market design features and a rapidly shifting set of economics. And so what Jupiter does is we're really focused on managing that, on serving that need. It's a very new technology, and we have 8 PhDs in the company. This is the first company I've ever had that we've had any PhDs in, and I'm honored to be working with so many smart people. It's very complicated work, how to charge and discharge and how to manage these assets in the market. And it's very exciting work and a very important part of helping the energy transition along. So that's energy storage in Jupiter.
So I always love a shout out for the PhD folks.
Yes.
And so you've all sort of teed up from your perspective sort of where you see the sort of clean energy landscape. What I want you now to do is to take this seismic event, the Inflation Reduction Act and the Bipartisan Infrastructure Law, the federal government actually getting involved. If you had to pick one, and only one, because we're a short panel, what is the one thing in either bill or IRA that has transformed the work that you're doing? And you only get one.
Ooh. Solar PTC.
The solar...
It's a tie. It's solar PTC and the $3 kilogram hydrogen PTC. But just staying, because you'd asked about solar before, even without incentives in large parts of the country, solar is at least on par competitive, even solar with storage, with certainly existing coal, existing gas, et cetera. I talked about new gas. But PPA, with more deployment of solar, PPA prices come down. So companies are, it's harder and harder for those who are building renewables to make money, right? You have assets that have a lot of earnings but are having less and less cash. So the way that you can finance, we're talking about financing clean energy, and forgive me, I'm a nerdy financial engineer, so this is why I picked the topic to talk about right now, but you can finance it with a form of, you can capitalize the project now with a solar PTC that turns it into annual cash. So you don't just reduce the cost of the project to build up front. That's a one-time benefit. Great. Now you realize that over 5 years. Now you get 10 years of cash flow for production base, right? Production from solar is, better and better and better. It's more financeable. You can deploy more of it because you're, right, building projects that are better off for customers and building projects that are better off for us as the company that's building them. So it's really, really powerful, and I love that part of the bill.
Only one.
Only one.
Because IRA is a game changer, and it's very comprehensive and complex. But I have to only choose one. For me, the big difference is that now we have a horizon of 10 years plus. And it was very painful to be in the Hill every December, trying to see if the PTCs were going to be extended or not, and making decisions in the business every year depending on that. So now this horizon, this 10 years plus of stability, I think is a game changer.
Terrific. So now we've heard a financing tool, a 10-year horizon. Andy, you got to bring us home with one more that isn't the first two.
From my perspective, what the IRA has accomplished and is accomplishing in the area of supply chain is the one item that I'd emphasize. Just taking battery technology as an example, there are so many commodity issues raised with the inputs to create these. The bill, in some of its less publicized features, creates a framework for supplying those commodities more securely, more from friendlier sources and in better ways on an ongoing basis that I think will be very impactful for all the energy transition technologies. The other part of the supply chain is if you look at where battery manufacturing facilities are being sited now within the United States. There are maps available that show all of the manufacturing capability that's coming through various phases of planning. The United States is looking at a 10-year lead by some of the leading international battery manufacturers out there in terms of technology and manufacturing capability. That is a big lead to take on. The IRA has set up a system where we will be seeing companies here in the United States take that challenge on, and we'll see how they do and how effective they can be. But I think in terms of de-risking the supply chain and ensuring that there's a very effective way for all of the equipment that's going to be needed to get the energy transition done, I think the law has been very effective in setting the groundwork for that.
So that's terrific. And you did actually achieve these sort of, you're right, this IRA is this sort of massive undertaking and change, and that there are something in there, I think, for everyone. But note all three of those important ones. Let me go back to the PhDs that you're hiring, because to me it gets to this question, and I think it's one that a lot of our audience, I think, will care about. How do all of you find the talent that you need in this new clean energy landscape? How do you retain them? Where are you looking, and who's your ideal candidate, and are they literally sitting in this room?
I would say yes. I think that I have direct experience with it, but to be successful at a company like ours, and I think in the business generally, to have a combination of business acumen and to have the technical experience with energy and energy systems and, natural capital. I was here when it was called the School of Forestry. So I would tell people that I went to the bee school and the tree school. Might not be the first time you've heard it, but it's a very helpful combination. But I think more importantly than that, you have to care about it. You don't have to, but it helps you be a better leader. It helps you think more critically. It helps you think not just about what's right in front of you, but 5 years out, 10 years out, et cetera. And those are the type of people that we look for. So, I would say folks in programs like these are one of the top places we look for new talent to come into the company. At least for us, I could brag about it all day, but we have a lot of great things about our company that help us retain talent. We move people around the company. I've been at the company for 6 years, and I've had three different roles. The head of investor relations role I did for 2 years, 8 months, and 32 minutes. Was brutal, but it's something like that gives you a broad perspective, and without the experience and background that I got in this program, I would not have been able to handle it, even though I barely did. So,
I can. Well, first of all, talent by definition is rare because it's what is outstanding. So it's not easy to find, and of course, the first place that you go is to the best colleges like this one and to the best educational systems. I have to say also that if your company is a multinational company, which is our case, you can find talent in many places, in many countries. We have many talented people here in US, but also in Spain, in Brazil, in Mexico, in France, in Germany. So the important thing is to detect the talent, to be smart enough to see when someone is really demonstrating that is outstanding, and then to retain the talent, which is even more difficult than to find the talent. But again, you have to try to be, as always, you have to try to be very honest with the talent, telling them what is your career path, what you can expect if you keep with us, and hopefully expect that they feel comfortable in your company and they want to keep with you.
And Andy, you're sort of moving from startup to established. You're in that sort of transition phase as well. How is that impacting your sort of growth?
We closed on the initial funding to get started in November of 19, and we had 5 employees at that time. And then, if you turn back the clock, the COVID experience began a few months after that. And so most of the early, the first couple years of the company, we grew during that time. And we're trying to hire. Not only was that very challenging, but also one of the great things about there being so much momentum behind the energy transition is that there's a real premium on hiring people with experience in different fields. And that has been challenging to manage as companies have tried to grow. One of the neat things about working in energy storage is it hasn't really been done before, and so none of us really know, we know more what we're doing now, but in the beginning especially, there wasn't anyone to hire with a lot of the experience that we were looking for. So we had to make it ourselves. And I think that has been something that we've continued to do. There's a lot of very interesting new stuff to work on in energy storage. A lot of what we're doing in energy storage from our company's point of view is fundamentally about renewables. If we can't figure out a way to solve these challenges in how electricity flows through wholesale markets, then there will be a ceiling on how much renewables can penetrate into the gen stacks of each of the grids. So we really see this as a crucial challenge to manage, and we're very focused on that. There's a lot of awareness within the company about the things that we're doing to move the energy transition forward and to help address climate change. And I feel like that's part of our culture that I think it has attracted people to the company, not just people from renewables, people from oil and gas companies have joined us and have been wonderful additions to our team. And it's been a challenging part of the business over the last several years, but we're growing and we need folks, and I have no doubt that we would love to have people from this program involved in the future.
So I want to encourage folks now to have that question if you have one in mind, and to our team, I think we'll have microphones that we'll be moving around. So as you're thinking about your questions, I'll ask one that is hopefully a bridge to our next speakers, our keynote on equity and innovation, where I see Taj Eldridge is over there, and I saw Nicole Satarman elsewhere. Well, I can't really see anything because the bright lights are on us, so I'm going to just point in general over there. And to our panel, in the work that you're doing, is there something, if you had a single wish that you could have fulfilled that would advance or accelerate equity in your part of the clean energy marketplace or landscape, what would you wish for? What would you like to see changed or different to help enhance equity in the space you're in?
Maybe being very specific, because IRA, you know that there is this concept of the energy community where you get an extra 10% PTC or ITC if you are developing your project in the so-called energy community, targeting to incentivize developers to be in communities that are distressed or they are suffering a high unemployment rate, etc. But in the offshore space, I think that we are defining these energy communities maybe in a different way. And for example, there is something that is not very consistent. You can be in an energy community if your substation land is qualifying for that, but not if your operation and maintenance building is qualifying for that, or for example, not the port where you are doing all the marshalling works, and actually a lot of labor is related to that. So I think that there are some nuances we have still to probably to tackle a little bit the fine print of the IRA.
Oh, the fine print of the IRA. That should be like the subtitle of the IRA is the fine print of the IRA.
Yes.
Other sort of thoughts on how to address equity?
What's happening now, or wish list, or things that I think are
hopeful? Wish list and hopeful.
I wish there was more support and understanding of what community solar can do for low-income communities. So look, if you look at our territory, we're the third most populous state, we cover half the state, and you analyze the people who have, they actually own property, they have a FICO score that could allow them financing, or they have the personal balance sheet that would allow them to pay cash, right? You filter out a number of other factors, and 10% of our 5.8 million customers maybe could afford to put solar on their house and benefit directly outside of just buying from our utility. That's not a lot. So if you have a community solar program that allows people to buy in where they can, to the extent that they can, there's an allocation specifically for low-income participants. So in part, it could be subsidized by the other participants. It could be supported through grant funding or offsets from the company that's building the community solar projects. I think it's really powerful because, again, solar is lowest cost and opening up doors for people who energy bills are a huge part of their household expenses to be able to get into solar access in a way that is really, really manageable, I think is important. And so if we could see more of that, I think it would be really great.
Thanks.
There is so much that's great and beneficial about the energy transition. There's cheaper, cleaner power. There's investment in local communities. There's improvements in air quality. There's a huge amount of tax base coming out of local investment. There's a huge amount of jobs and economic activity growing out of all of these changes that are happening in solar and wind and offshore and battery storage, all of these things that are the direct consequence of the energy transition moving forward. I would really ask that while the Inflation Reduction Act has provided a lot of certainty, a lot more certainty than we've had before, 10 years plus, I'm going to cheat a little bit and say, if the one thing I would ask for is if we could see a price on carbon, if we could see a carbon dividend, if we could see these things move forward, because there would be so much positive coming to so many communities if we can advance the rate of progress really significantly. The IRA has done a lot, but at the end of the day, there's quite a lack of federal policy on energy and climate change generally that comes out of the lack of kind of a political will having been developed so far. And I think if we could move that forward much more quickly, we would be seeing so many benefits across so much of all of the communities that would be affected.
So thank you all for that sort of part of our discussion. I now want to turn it open to the folks here in the audience. You have this wonderful opportunity, and I see some hands coming up already all over the place to really see what this panel of CEOs and executives what they're doing in this space. I ask questions and not long statements because.
I guess my question, statement, and not long-winded moment. First of all, I think I have got you beat because I was at Sage. I spent a lot of time burying myself at Sage Hall when I was an undergrad, and that certainly doesn't exist anymore. But
it does. My office is in Sage.
Well, but let's just put it different. Never mind. I want to throw out the word fusion because that's what I think would certainly change the platform for all three of the presenters and for most of us in clean energy. And I'd like to get some feedback on what you're thinking about, whether you're aware of how close fusion is now to power delivery, and whether you're starting to look at it.
So I guess to the panel, and I'll broaden fusion into nuclear in general. Might be okay. Sorry. Then just fusion.
Yes. They say that fusion is going to be the solution in 20 years and will always be. And I hope that they're right, but the reality is that is a big challenge. No, I mean the massive investments that they are all the countries now they are doing in the ITER in fusion billions and billions of dollars, but when this is going to render benefit is very difficult to predict. I think it's going to take long, and I think that being practical now, we have to focus on what we have now at hand: solar, wind, battery storage, and hopefully someday, if it is in 30 days, 30 years, 50 years, then happy to see that. No, but in the meantime, we need to work with what we have. No?
All right, we'll go rapid fire questions because there's lots of hands and not a lot of time. So does someone else have a mic right now?
My question is directed to Mr. Bowman. Considering that utility scale energy storage projects, their function is to optimize the revenue mostly through arbitrage and some ancillary services, I'm wondering if Jupiter is thinking about sort of optimizing for emissions. And I know that, a lot of the work coming from the Emissions First Partnership and a lot of the interest from corporates is to start to think about the emissions related to the operation of renewable assets. So I'm wondering if, it's not necessarily true that an energy storage project is actually reducing emissions on the grid. And I'm wondering if Jupiter is thinking about citing future projects to do that.
Yeah, the energy storage is evolving differently in every market as a result of the market design that exists there. In some places, energy arbitrage is more the way that you can get storage built. In other markets, we're seeing a lot more applications for capacity. The idea of clean capacity, contracts like that are moving forward. I think ultimately storage is going to be what is necessary to increase renewable penetration. I think ultimately storage is going to compete more with gas as time goes by, as the cost gets cheaper. And I think the ability to take more clean power from areas, if you look at how much solar is curtailed in California right now, if you look at the same dynamic as it occurs in ERCOT and SPP, that is incredibly useful power that would love to make its way to market and displace more, more carbon-heavy, thermal emissions. And I think that as storage gets much cheaper, it's going to be able to serve that role more. The challenge that we've seen over the last few years is the CapEx. The cost of this equipment is so high, has been so high, that we build it wherever we can find a business case for it. As it gets cheaper, we're going to roll more into clean peak products, into capacity structures, more into, there's a new ancillary service product, every quarter it seems, that is kind of growing the definition of these products to fit more as a shock absorber for greater renewables coming in. I think that's the direction it's headed, and I think there's going to be a lot more of that style of storage built in the future. And I think it's going to be, just very crucial in reducing emissions as time goes by, because the only thing that we've got, the only other person in the room is gas at the moment. And the more we can compete with that, the better from an emissions point of view.
So we had a question there. I know we had one here, and there's one very high hand raised over there that I want to make sure we get to. What?
Thank you all so much for taking the time and sharing your insights. One of the possible effects of the IRA is to build new constituencies for clean energy in places where they might not have existed before, and sort of shifting the political economy of clean energy legislation somewhat. Is this something you're already observing in your interactions with regulators, state regulators? And I guess it goes sort of to Mr. Miranda's point of the time horizon. Like, do you feel like there's more certainty even independently of the IRA?
Well, if you see the map of where the renewable is deployed at the scale in US, you will see that it's Texas. You will see that it's Iowa.
It's red.
Yeah. It's quite red.
Yeah.
So also, of course, California, no doubt, etc. Right? But I would say that the reality, if we forget about the speech, the politics speeches, and we focus on the reality, is deployed everywhere. And I don't think it's going to change with IRA. It's going to be the same. It's deployed everywhere it makes sense economically. That's it.
Yeah. that narrative is not real, right? It's for show. I think that, you have regulated utilities who are not necessarily benefiting from the constructive regulatory environment that thankfully we have in the state of Florida, which, as you know, is a mostly red state. Some of that, right, you have to deal with kind of job loss potentially, or the perception of job loss. It's job transition. These utilities need to train people to work in new generation technologies. But the amount that solar and wind and paired with storage is beating out the economics of the generation that's currently running under the surface, and with the IRA, it's even more. Under the surface, they're making the right decisions, and it's reducing costs. And I would say, again, the narrative is surface level. It's not really what's happening on the ground, from my perspective.
Our last question.
Oh, this is a real simple one. It's for Andy as well. Is lithium-ion doing everything you need to do to help manage the grid, or is your company looking at all at longer duration flow batteries or any of these other? Do you have any interest in anything beyond lithium-ion?
Yeah, we're technology agnostic. We're cannot wait for longer duration technologies to become available. We look at everything that's out there: flow batteries, iron batteries, everything. The fact of the matter is, right now, lithium-ion is definitely the best option, the most financeable, the most buildable option. Also, when you look at the scale of economics behind this growing wave of lithium-ion manufacturing that's occurring all over the planet right now to accommodate mainly the electric vehicle transition, but stationary storage as a corollary. I mean, there's a chance that this technology, which is maybe not the best fit for our energy storage needs, just by virtue of the scale of manufacturing that's being undertaken and the economies of scale squashing down the price, may end up carrying the day. Much as we saw with PV, maybe not the best solar technology, beating out a lot of other interesting technologies over time.
So I know there are way more questions out there in the audience. This is going to be an opportunity, I think, after our panel to come up and talk to them one-on-one, corner any of us at any point during the conference and really drill deeper, because we have an amazing keynote coming up next that we want to make sure we have time on equity and clean energy innovation and development. But before we go there, a huge thank you to our panel for taking it.